Hi, I'm Doc Martin, the lone journalist for KRAZ-TV here at the Zero Channel, because this book can't have it anywhere else. Island Infernos by John C. McManus, author of Fire and Fortitude. It is the U.S. Army's Pacific War Odyssey, 1944. Just 1 year, huh? What a great, well-written book. This guy said he couldn't have done it without the people in archive. He mentioned hundreds and hundreds of people because, well, that's what he does. There's his picture. John C. McManus, Ph.D., is a curator's distinguished professor of U.S. military history at the Missouri University of Science and Technology and a leading historian of World War II. His critically acclaimed books include September Hope, The Dead and Those About to Die, Fire and Fortitude, recipient of the Gilder Lehrman Prize for Military History. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, folks, war is not a pretty thing. I hope it never has to happen again, but this was a terrible thing. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you're not, I don't know if you should even, well, a lot of people are not going to appreciate when they read this, some of the graphic and dramatic details, because, well, it happened and it's true. But it's pretty gory. Let me warn you with that. Other than that, I have never met a more seminal work on World War II. There's a lot of them out there, but this guy has done his homework. After some 2 years at war, the Army in the Pacific held ground across nearly a third of the globe, from Alaska's Aleutians to Burma and New Guinea. The challenges ahead were enormous, supplying a vast number of troops over thousands of miles of ocean, surviving in jungles ripe with dysentery, malaria, and other tropical diseases, fighting an enemy prone to ever more desperate and dangerous assaults. Yet the Army had proven it could fight. Now it had to prove it could win a war. Brilliantly researched and written, Island Infernos moves seamlessly from highest generals to the lowest foot soldiers and in between, capturing the true essence of this horrible conflict. A sprawling yet page-turning narrative, the story spans the battles for Saipan and Guam, the appalling carnage of Peleliu, General MacArthur's dramatic return to the Philippines, and the grinding jungle combat to capture the island of Leyte. This masterful history is the second volume of John C. McManus's trilogy on the U.S. Army in the Pacific War, proving McManus to be one of our finest historians of World War II. Can you imagine 2 more volumes, one that follows, I suppose, yeah, and one before this. This is just on the Pacific War. I think he starts out at Kwajalein. It's a tiny island, and that was early. And then in the later parts, it was Leyte. But I'll tell you what, it was the same technique. The Japanese would not give up. And they had a sense of honor. They'd rather die, commit suicide, than to be captured. And they didn't think highly of people who did surrender. So they had to fight tooth and nail to the very last one. And they couldn't leave anybody alive, because if they thought they'd cleared out and left one guy, they'd all be sitting around getting ready to leave and be shot at by snipers and stuff. So they just had to mop them up. And they hated that term, mopping up. The biggest contention in this book, and it was a really sad story because as a veteran I understand the rivalry, and you think now it's just a joke, but between the Army and the Marine Corps, well, the big problem is the and it always boils down to ego. And it was the high muckety-muck generals up in the top, and Kruger, who would have nothing to say good about the Army, because he was a Marine. He'd call them my Marines. He didn't say the or Marines. He said my Marines. And he was, the tremendous fighting that the Army went through. And there was a clearing out, and all this clearing out, of course, it took so long to do. And here's a little thing about Kruger and many of the generals. They never visited the site. They never talked to one enlisted man. Kruger and some of them were the worst for that. Absolutely demanding and being, like this is the Zero Channel, so they're big assholes, It was terrible. It was just, they're so aloof and they were jealous of their positions, and it was just, they had to get along, but they gave each other hell all the time. But mostly the Marines did not get it, and then it infected the men, and that's why it's gotten so bad today. I mean, not bad today, but I'm just saying the rivalry still exists. And the Marines are tough, and they're probably the top dogs, but still, everybody's in battle together, and when you're lying there dead and each helping each other, there is no difference in the services. It's either fight or, I don't know, fight or die. It's a horrendous story. Anyways, MacArthur got run out of Corregidor a couple years earlier, and he vowed he would come back to the Philippines. So he had a base out down in Brisbane, and a lot of the Oahu was a site of some of the other generals, and a lot of the theater operations were not at these battle scenes. Nimitz was a great guy, and he tried to patch up things between people, and he had the supreme command, sort of. And on the Navy side, at least, for sure. But here's another thing. MacArthur didn't like Eisenhower, and then they all got later to be 5-star generals, so I don't know how that worked out, but history is what it is, and we know the outcome of it. Anyways, during some of these battles, they tried to establish beachheads, and they'd said, we'll be out of there in a week. And they were months at times, months. And they're mopping up, again, they didn't like that term, going pillbox to pillbox, foxhole to foxhole. And, at Leyte, which was later in the last big battle formed in here, MacArthur wanted to come in right at monsoon time. The worst idea ever. And it always was heavy water in the tropics, and it was always hot. And a lot of guys got dengue, fever, and dysentery, and it was just awful. It was just awful. Of course, the Japanese, I am surprised that he had so much data on the Japanese that he was able to talk about each one. But even the Japanese had their infighting amongst themselves. They felt superior in that they didn't need so much, and so they didn't send guys out with a lot of food and stuff. And actually, most of the Japanese casualties were from malnutrition, starvation, and all of that, because they held out. I mean, it was awful. It was, you just can't believe it until you read this book. And, when you read the book, you may not want to read another one. You have enough, but I'll tell you, this is the real deal, people. This is the story. And this island hopping, they just had to keep pushing the Japanese further north and further north. And then, of course, I think it was before that, or Truck, where Nimitz and there's Battle of Midway. I think that was before and all that, where they'd sink a lot of the Japanese carriers and all of that. But then they started, and I think it was in 44, they really started seeing the kamikazes. And they were relentless. They were relentless. And they were pushed so far out that they couldn't return anyway, the point of no return, so they just ran their aircraft into ships and ammo dumps and stuff like that. the logistics was just terrible. They had to stack hundreds of thousands of tons. Some units would eat 3 tons of food a day. I mean, just they had to supply that to their soldiers, and now they weren't getting the highest amount either. They'd come in for Christmas dinner sometimes, but they made sure everybody got turkey on Turkey Day. So the morale was up and down, but mostly the morale was better in American troops than the Japanese at times. But whenever they thought they were on the edge, though, everybody was up. But when the food got down, or bad weather, or really the treatment of the head officers is what really caused the morale to disperse. And then sometimes people like Wingate, he was a very famous commander in Burma, and they let Stilwell in there, and he was pushy. He got his objectives, but Morell's martyrs were some of the most courageous guys, and they all enlisted local help when they could. The Burmese, the Filipino fighters, and when they liberated them, they got them to work for them. They paid them, but it was still hell for everybody. I'm just going on about this book, and I haven't even got started. But anyway, the island-to-island fighting was intense on every island. They tried softening them up with barrages and stuff, but since they were dug in, and they laid out palm trees. Palm trees can take tremendous barrages, and because they live in hurricane, they can bend all the way double and come back up because they're a monocot type of vein system. So they were super resilient. So they, even with heavy bombs, loaded, when those pillboxes and stuff were covered over with palm trees and deep underground, they couldn't get them out of there. So anyways, the book ends at the Battle of Leyte. It goes on, of course, so the fights and all that. But the Battle of the Bay of Leyte, they moved right in. They got on the island pretty quick, but after that, see, there was a huge island. I mean, it's several hundred square miles probably, and the other islands, some of them were just 3 miles by a mile, and it took them, I mean, they were dug in so hard that it was just hell. It was pure hell to get those enemies out. So they could not have gotten along with the Japanese-American interpreters, and there is another story of how we interned them, and finally they apologized. I think Reagan apologized many years later. Anyway, it's all part of the great story. It's a horrendous story, though. And I guess if you want to learn and not been there, read the book, Island Infernos by John C. McManus. There isn't a better story told. And if you want graphics, you'll get them. But it ain't pretty, folks. I was in the Vietnam War, even though I didn't see combat duty. I got affected by it somewhat. So I can tell you, Semper Fi, hoorah. But anyway, everyone, thanks for your service. Navy, Army, Coast Guard, Air Force, Army Air Corps, and the Marines. Thank you, folks, and thank you, veterans, for your service again. Read the book, Island Infernos by John C. McManus. Goodbye.